Hey guys, my name is Ujjwal. I'm one of the co-founders at Zymrat, and I would like to welcome all of you to another episode of Man of the Hour series by THR. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking to a very special person, a very close friend of mine, and an in-house team member at Zymrat, somebody who has been played a key role in building Zymrat with me and Ankita, Vyshnav Baburaj. Now, the topic of today's conversation is very relevant to the current situation and what's happening across the country and across the world, and that is about COVID. Now, unfortunately, Vaishnav was diagnosed with COVID-19 almost a month ago. But the great news is that Vaishnav has recovered well and has come out of COVID stronger than before, and he is back to normal and he is living his life normally now. So we're going to be talking to Vaishnav about how his experience was, fighting COVID, and what did he do to ace and come out of COVID strongly, and how is he doing now. Welcome to the show, Vaishnav.
Hey guys, how's it going, man? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, dude, it's just so different because, guys, just to tell you, Vaishnav was the one always behind the camera on everything, and he's the one who is helping me and whoever is on the other side of the screen, setting up their videos, locations, and everything. But today, he is the one in front of the camera. So, how is it feeling, Vaishnav, today?
I mean, it feels pretty good, man. It's a different perspective for me, so it's pretty cool to be on this side of the camera. Yeah.
Dude, like, first of all, it's absolutely, like, I would say it feels really great to have you back on the floor again. We are seeing that you are getting back to the work as well. You have started to work. But let's, to all the viewers, to all the listeners, what we'll do is we'll cover how your journey in this last 1 month was like. So to start with, dude, like, when did this happen? What was the timeline when you were diagnosed with COVID?
So I think it was somewhere around like March 25th, where like one of my family members, my dad, he started feeling a little bit. It started off very basic. It started off like basic cold, coughs, and sort of slight body pain and everything. And then at some point, it started to build up. It started to perk up, and it was really bad. So what happened was, the funny thing was, he isolated himself. So he was inside the room, like taking care of everything, and me and mom, we were doing pretty well. So it was just us three in the family, and and somehow the whole thing, the spread is through the air, right? So there's not so much you can do apart from, like, if you really socially distance and really keep your safety. So and we ended up getting it as well, and we all tested positive. That was the thing. So it was pretty quick, and the whole thing was, it was really bad fever and really bad body aches. Like my whole body, my muscles, everything, like, you get those aches where it's to the bone. It was something like that, and it was a little bit intense. So yeah, that was the whole feeling.
So it's been almost a month, I guess. It was 5th March, and today is 26th April, I guess. 27th April, yeah. So almost a month now. So what happened? Like, were you guys able to pin down on how your father contracted COVID? And then, of course, once he did, then probably you guys got it from him. But how did he get infected?
The thing was, my entire family kept pretty safe. Like, we always hand sanitize and always had our masks on and everything. But I think at some point, like, my dad did go to a restaurant, and of course, when you sit and eat at restaurants, masks are off. You're just quite vulnerable to situations. And actually, what happened is, during this whole like February, March period, people also started not taking care of the whole thing that well. Like, it wasn't as bad as it is right now, right? So people, I think, were pretty free of their distance, so people would come walk next to you or whatever. So I think at some point there was some sort of spread, and I think he contracted it that way.
Oh, I think you're right, man. I mean, because I think right from January itself, or let's say once the end of the year started, after New Year's and all that stuff, early in 2021, I think people did start to take things more casually. Traveling started to come into picture. People started dreaming about vacations, going out to restaurants, and we of course, I went out a couple of times here and there, and Bangalore was back to normal. All the pubs, all the restaurants were running with the usual waiting time. So definitely there was a, I would say, kind of laid back attitude from people, and that's what probably got us back into this surge or tsunami, whatever people are calling this. So definitely there was a laid back attitude from people as well. So what was the initial symptoms, dude? Like how did you guys know that first your father had COVID, and then how did you and your mom know that you are also coming down with the same infection?
I think it was so my dad was complaining like he was having like a little bit of a headache and a little bit like fever going on and temperature and all that. And one thing he did was he has a cousin who's a doctor, so he was constantly in contact and like keeping up, keeping the info up with him and like checking what it was and all that. Because we hear things and we're always trying to like protect ourselves and all that. So that whole thing was happening. So the symptoms, as far as that was concerned, for me personally, it was the first thing that I felt was I started feeling weak in my knees, which was like a weird feeling to me because I'm not that old, and feeling weak in your knees is something I hear a lot of old folks complain about. So I really started feeling weak in my knees and my bones started to hurt, like really internal pains. I thought, what, I'm young, it'll be all fine, I'll sleep it off. And the next day it was pretty bad. It was pretty unbearable. And the fever was always at like, 99, 100, something in that range. So for all of us. And, when I discussed it with my family, they also kind of agreed that it started off with the knee. Like the pains always came from my knee. I don't know if it's a genetic thing with my family or is that how it starts? I have no idea. But yeah, so it's always really bad body aches. And the fever is still somewhat like, you can take the pain, you can take the fever, it's totally fine, but the body aches were like really killer. So I've never felt anything like that before. This was like next level of pain,
Dude, what the interesting thing has happened, I think, compared to where we in 2020 compared to 2021 in terms of COVID, is that a lot more younger people are not only contracting the virus or catching the virus, but also, I'm not sure if contracting is the right word, but whatever, catching the virus, they're also getting pretty seriously ill. They're getting sick, right? And I was reading, of course, Twitter is like massively abuzz right now, trying to help out in whatever ways possible by amplifying the resources. And in one of the Twitter threads I was reading, somebody was mentioning a couple of stories where the caregiver, typically in any family, when the parents are 60 or 65 years old, the caregivers are in the age range of, let's say, 25 to 40, like the younger kids and sons and daughters. And it's so sad that the caregivers are the ones who are actually dying, or let's say are going through the fertility rate more than the adults. And some of it is credited to the fact that, of course, the adults got the vaccine, at least 1 dose, 2 doses. So that has proven to be helpful, but it's kind of it has become much more scarier for younger folks in the range of 25 to 40 and all that. But and as you mentioned, the symptoms start with weakness and knee pains and all that stuff. Like I know, Vaishnav, when we were speaking, when you had fallen sick in the beginning, that you had to go to hospital, all three of you, your mom and your dad. So, but at what point, like, do you feel like, because of course, based on the typical WHO symptoms and the guidelines which have been set by doctors globally and in India, our country as well, I would say the first step of, let's say, the care starts at home, where you start monitoring the saturation levels of oxygen and all that. So, did you feel that it was going in not the right direction, and that's why you decided to go to hospitals, all three of them?
What we did is we made sure, like I said, right, my dad was in contact with his cousin who's a doctor, so he did suggest us to get an oximeter and like a steamer and all these things just in case, because we haven't had ourselves tested just yet. So this was all like pre test results, precautions that we were taking. So oximeter and everything was in home. We were checking ourselves out. Oxygen was completely fine. The saturation was fine. It was just that we were feeling pretty weak, and we did decide to go to the hospital once the results came. The results did come positive, so like we were having our fingers crossed. We were thinking like, hey man, like still a glimmer of hope, till the results come. It did come positive, so we did plan to move to a hospital just because my dad is diabetic and we didn't want to take chances, right? So because all three of us did get get the virus together. There's no one really at home to take care of us in terms of like, cook food. And we can't afford to like get somebody else infected just because, taking chances of getting somebody's help to do things and all that. So I think, the best idea was to move to a hospital. And then we did go to a hospital in that way. And I think that proved to be quite a useful thing because, we didn't have to stress about. That's another thing, right? Like your oxygen saturation, everything drops the minute you stress out, the minute you exert yourself, the minute you ask too much of your body. Also, I think moving to a hospital proved quite helpful because it's always advised that once you get COVID, you should get a CT scan and all that. It's always good to be at a hospital when you get all these things, and you're instantly like monitored and you're instantly taken care of in that sense. Like if there is something going on in your lungs or your chest or something, it is immediately in front of a doctor's attention instead of like waiting around and all that stuff. Yeah.
You brought up a couple of very interesting points in terms of, especially when the entire family catches the infection, then it becomes a very, very difficult situation to handle. But before we jump into that, how did you guys get tested? You got a home collection done, or how was it?
Thankfully, in Bangalore, we have the facility. I mean, everywhere in India, of course, right now, but like we had the opportunity of getting somebody home to get us tested. So it was pretty quick back then. I do not know right now because I think it's taken about a week or like 2-3 days to get results. That day we did get tested and we got the results on the same day. So we were pretty lucky that way. So immediately we shifted to a hospital as well. So we didn't risk anybody getting infected in that sense. Yeah.
So you guys got tested and you got the result on the same day?
On the same day, yeah.
Okay, that was pretty interesting because I've heard of cases where people are, taking 72 hours. I mean, I think when I got tested, our result came after 72 hours. But then of course, I think probably it was so because it was a negative. So maybe that's why it was done by BBMP. So maybe the negative results were, I would say, deprioritized or something like that. Because I think when you're positive, at least in case of BBMP, I think they call you straight up and then they tell you that you have to quarantine right away and all that stuff. But I'm not sure how this is working in the sense of private hospitals and private testing centers and all that stuff. Of course, right now the situation, I'm sure that centers, all the municipal organizations, all the medical centers are overloaded. I mean, not even a question there that they're massively overloaded, so results could be delayed. But still, I think 72 hours is where people are trying to stick to the window in terms of getting the results out.
Yeah, and I think that's also a thing, like you said. I'm sure like if it's a negative result, it is deprioritized because they're trying to like get their results to everybody just so that people are cautious and not quarantined. And even if you get tested by a private testing facility, they do inform the BBMP. So we did get calls. But by that time, we were in the hospital, so it didn't matter. So we did tell them that, hey guys, we've moved to a hospital and everything's taken care of, so it's fine. But yeah, they do try to enforce that immediately. As soon as you get the result, they do give you a call and say like, how's it going? Like, is everything taken care of? Because they do want to come and seal off your house so that you don't like step off and like infect people.
You live in a society, right, Vyshnav?
Yeah, I live in an apartment building.
So was the entire building contained or something like that?
Not really, because we're pretty much always indoors, so we didn't step out much that entire day. And as soon as we got the result, we just packed up our stuff and like left and drove ourselves to the hospital. So it was completely like there was minimum contact with anybody else, and and it was like 12 in the night. So again, like no chances of like spreading it in any other places. So what we did is, to be extra cautious, we did sanitize everything we touched, like say for the example, the lift and all that stuff. But we kept our distance from security guards and everything, and just took care of it. So it was pretty fine. Like the BBMP didn't come and seal off. I also think it's because we immediately did move to a hospital that didn't bother coming home to seal off this place, because there's nobody home anyway and nobody else tested positive. So that's also good news for us. We didn't infect anyone. So it's something off the conscience.
Yeah, I know. I think that's quite an achievement, because somewhere I was reading in Delhi, I think every single person is affecting 9 other people. That's like insane, right? I'm sure even in Bangalore now it's the same situation. But that's amazing that you guys drove yourself to the hospital. Who drove you? Your dad, your mom? Who was the driver?
I drove, man. Like they were a little too weak to do that, so I just took responsibility and I drove myself. But I did feel like I wasn't completely. Anyway, it was 12, so there was no traffic. But like, I didn't feel completely like fit enough to drive. But I did drive myself somehow, like, with the whole family to the hospital. So that was great.
And of course, now the situation is like has turned for the worse, of course, because there's lack of beds and ICUs and oxygens. But how was the experience? I think in the month of March it was still more, I would say, stable in terms of being able to find a bed in the hospital. Correct?
Yeah, so actually, that was another thing we kind of struggled with. We couldn't find hospital beds. Everyone's starting to get filled up. So I think this was the start, like, the genesis of the wave 2 in Bangalore. So people were booking in. There was a lot more, the steady rise of cases that were happening, and hospitals weren't prepared. But through a contact, we did get like, a couple of beds in the hospital. So, and again, like, you're gonna get put in the COVID ward. You're not gonna get like private rooms and all that stuff. So somehow we did find some beds, and I think we're pretty lucky in that sense, because I know quite a lot of people like right now they're scrambling to like find the hospital beds and like spaces for all these things. But thankfully back then it wasn't as severe as it was right now.
No, dude. Of course. I mean, right now the situation is definitely like it's so morbid all around. Of course, and very sad. But of course, as a country, as especially the startup community, what we are seeing is coming together in a huge manner to help out citizens and whoever is facing. But still, that no matter how the problem is that no matter how much money you invest into things, if the infrastructure is not built from the beginning, it takes time to. You could build an ICU hospital overnight, like China has done it in the past, but here I think things take a little bit of time. But still, I think people are putting in effort, at least authorities and whoever is responsible for these things, and they are trying to come up with solutions. But definitely, the people are scrambling for beds and oxygens and all that stuff. So, Vaishnav, how was the experience in terms of like when you went to the hospital? Like, what happened? Like, I'm asking as a non-COVID patient's point of view. Like, what happens once you go there?
So the first thing they do check is, of course, your BP, your heart rate, and your oxygen saturation, right? And the thing about COVID is it makes your heart go like crazy, like it speeds it up. So your BP might shoot up a little bit. If you do have problems, that is, with your BP is definitely going to shoot up. Your heart rate is high, and your oxygen. Since your heart rate is high, the chances of oxygen being used up also is the way it works is oxygen is fuel, so it's gonna start coming up. But if everything is safe, what they do is they immediately start you on an IV, and they start your antivirals, right? And they also start you off with blood thinners and steroids to help your body cope with the whole thing. And there's a couple of medication which comes with a whole. So it's like a packaged kind of deal. If you have a mild COVID, this thing, which is what we three had, like in my family, it's more or less like a packaged deal, which is gonna kind of let you fight the flu, the virus off. I'm sure, like if you have serious cases, they do take proper intensive care of you, because they do ask you whether you have any other diseases like diabetic or anything else, like which runs in the family, all those things. But other than that, once you're there, they just make sure that they monitor you constantly, like every 2 hours they come and monitor you. Your medication is provided, and you're properly nourished, because I think that's something people who sort of treat COVID at home should really pay attention to, because if you're not eating right, you got to eat proper food to like get your body to like fight this off, because I'm sure your body goes through a lot, and it's really taking a lot of effort to fight off this virus. So I think nourishment is really important as well. So they take care of all of this. So you also get prescribed multivitamins and all that while you're at the hospital, and once you discharge as well. That's part of the whole course.
And was there a parameter which was being tracked in terms of how severe the virus is or how severe the infection is? Like how we track temperatures, right? It could be 103 or it could be 99. Was there any parameter on your reports which was being tracked by the doctors on a daily basis or something like that?
Yes. So I think as soon as you get your results in, whether you're positive or not, you also have your viral load capacity, right? Like how much your body is doing. So in my case, it was pretty okay. I was 30, 35, something like that. So it was pretty less compared to others. It depends, it depends on how people's body is. So if you have a lower kind of number there, I'm sure doctors pay more attention to you. And if you have other diseases, they pay more attention to you just because. So when the doctor came on his rounds and met me, he did tell me that you have a very mild case. It's completely fine. All you got to do is rest and take your medication, and this is going to be off in a minute. So, and the funny part is, once I did move to the hospital and once they started off with the medication and everything, I did feel much better. I felt immediately back to normal, but I did have to spend 5 days in the hospital. So it was like, the whole nag of why am I in a hospital? I'm feeling much better about all this. But yeah, for other people, I'm sure if your viral load the number is pretty low, you will properly be taken care of in terms of it completely depends, right? So like I said, if the infection in your CT scan, if the infection rate is too high, then you will be provided certain medication and certain inhalers and all these things to fight that off. A lot of things were going on. So in my ward itself, there were a couple of people who were in need of oxygen to breathe properly, or they have sessions in the day where you have a physiotherapist come in and tell them how to do some breathing exercises and this and that. And certain old people have constant change in their medication, and all of these things happen. So it's very individualized thing, right? That's another, I guess, problem with this virus is it goes through so many different variations that if the way I experienced it might not be the way you might experience it. So it's a completely different individual experience.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it depends on a lot of factors, I guess. As you said, it also depends on what kind of conditions you may or may not be carrying, in terms of diabetes, in terms of blood pressure, hypertension, a lot of these things. And accordingly, the medicines will also be adjusted. How was the viral load for your family members? Was it still higher or was it lower for somebody else?
I was around 30, 35. I don't remember exactly. My dad was around 25 and so was my mom. So we weren't really dipping our feet into the scary numbers, which is below 20. So of what I've heard, if you're below 20, that's when you should definitely seek medical attention, because your body can't take the load that well. So thankfully my family was doing fine. It's just that we did want to move to a hospital for having people around us to take care, just because you don't want to risk it, right? Nobody wants to risk it. So that's right. That was the whole idea.
And did that, when you said your dad has diabetes, so did that period when he had the COVID-19 virus in his body as well, did it affect his diabetes symptoms in any manner? Did it increase his sugar levels or did it decrease his sugar levels? Anything like that?
Yeah, so the thing about my dad is since the last 2 years, he's been controlling his diet really well, and that's been reflecting on his sugar levels, right? So he's been keeping a very normal sugar level, fasting sugar would be generally around the 95s to 110. So that's pretty normal for anybody, but especially impressive if you're diabetic, right? Because you generally have it in the 200s, 250s. But the thing was, as soon as, I'm sure this is part to do with the virus, but more to do with medication, because there were a couple of steroids prescribed to keep our body, fit enough. So that really started pushing his sugar levels up to the 300s, 320s. So something that the nurses and the doctors do ask you if you are diabetic is to start taking insulin, right? Like if you are diabetic, because they know for a fact that once you do start taking this medication, it's only gonna get higher from there. So insulin is a good way to like cut that off. But my dad was pretty particular, and he still controlled his diet somewhat in the hospital, with whatever they were bringing in. So it was pretty fine, but it did take him like around a week and a half to bring it back to what it was, because the body just went through so much, influx. So no matter what he did at the hospital, no matter what he did while he was taking medication, sugar levels still seem to be on the higher side. So that's kind of scary, if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, whatever, you have that kind of thing behind your head. But it did take him quite a while to bring him back to normal, and right now he's doing pretty fine. So that was all right, and that's it.
And the treatment that was given to you and your family, Vyshnav, was it more like symptomatic? Like, so if you have fever, they would give you paracetamol, or what the specific medications which were also given to you guys?
Yeah, so all three of us got basically the same kind of medication. It was only for my mom that they did give a fever tablet just to like bring her fever down, which she had the first 2 days we were at hospital. Otherwise, it was pretty much the same kind of deal. Some stuff slightly adjusted depending on like age and things like that, but other than that, it was pretty much the same deal. So I guess that's kind of like the package of medication you get. Like it's the pre-prescribed kind of stuff. Especially if you have like a mild attack. If you have a much more serious attack, I'm sure like it's properly customized for how to treat it. Like, yeah,
you're right. I mean, of course, I mean, there are medications which doctor would prescribe if there are the conditions are more severe, and especially the medications which are of course very popular in the media and which kind of keep running out of stock as well. But since we are not medical experts, we're not going to name any medications on this video as well. We just want to talk about how Vyshnav and his family's experience was fighting this virus away. Tell me this, Vyshnav, so at what point did the experts from her hospitals realize that now it's good for you guys to leave the hospital and go back to your homes? When did you get discharged?
In 5 days, actually. So what they do is they give you an antiviral, right? So the antiviral lasts for 5 days, and that comes in through your IV. So as soon as that's done, they do ask you to like go home and quarantine for some time, preferably for 12 days, because the chances that the virus dies off or like is stopped in like 7 days to 8 days, right? But you don't want to take chances, so they do tell you like 12 to 14 days you should stay at home. Yeah, so in 5 days we were out of the hospital and back at home, and that's when the whole thing started actually. But like we'll get to it.
Your viral load was tested again before you were let go from the hospital?
That's another thing our doctors told us, is that you don't have to get tested again, and simply because first of all the whole testing facility is jam-packed, right. And secondly, there is no chance of it surviving for that long, right? So even if you want to get tested for some other reason, you can get tested after 10 days, and 90% is the virus is gone. It's not going to stay in your system. But what the doctor said is like, listen, in 10 days it's going to be gone. So you don't have to get tested unless you have to travel or you have to do something in that sense. Like if you have to return to some place, of course get tested. Otherwise, it's completely fine. There's no need for it. That's what I was told.
So I guess once whoever the patient is has stopped showcasing the symptoms like fever and any drop in the oxygen saturation number whatsoever and things like that, probably then they are kind of deemed fit to go home and quarantine and take care of themselves instead of being in the hospital. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So and that's the thing, right? Like in 5 days you're generally out of symptoms. So that's what I've heard from a lot of people home quarantining as well, is that the fever and the body aches, they last for about like a week or max 10 days, and then it's over. But then you do end up quarantining for another 10-15 days because that's what's recommended. But the chances of the virus attack isn't that 7 days is when the intensity is the most.
Right.
So if your body withstands that, that's pretty, you'll be back to normal very quick.
So how was the experience coming? How did you feel coming out of the hospital, and how did you drive back?
Yeah, so again, like I drove myself back, and I was so again, like your 5 days in a hospital bed is definitely going to make you feel a little weak, and also you have all these medications and everything running through your veins, so that's not fun. But driving back was fine. I was a bit weak. I was weak for quite some time, so it just like stayed that way. But yeah, coming back home is when the real challenge starts, and I'm sure like a lot of people who home quarantines do is definitely going to understand what I'm going to say, because taking care of yourself, taking care of the people you live with, managing food, managing sort of people around you who live with you in the same society, because they're also pretty like afraid of what's going on. They're not exposed to like, or they don't understand. Of course, like we all can understand how somebody would feel if your neighbor has a deadly disease or something like that. So that was another thing. So there was quite a lot of things going on in that sense. Yeah, but coming back from hospital, it felt good, to be honest, because it finally felt like you're coming back home. You've survived something. The danger is off. You can breathe finally in the whole sense. You can properly like let go. It's totally fine. So yeah, it felt good.
And how many days you guys were advised to quarantine?
We were advised to quarantine for 12 days, but we ended up staying at home for 15, if I'm not wrong. Because again, like I said, like we're one of those families who don't want to take chances, just to infect other people. Because I don't like living with the guilt. So we stayed home for like definitely 15 days, but it's advised to stay for 12.
But I'm sure even now, like you would be probably not going out much because anyways the cases are like extremely high and everybody's under a lockdown anyways. So what was like, now comes the real part, right? Because of course hospital was, a hospital, I'm sure there were people take care of you and your family, and food was given on time already and all that stuff. But what I've heard of, the sad part of the second wave of the COVID is that I think every single person has been hit by it in some form, either directly or with an immediate family member or extended family member, friends, family, colleagues. Somebody is definitely hit, right? Whoever I have spoken to in the second wave, whether it's a family member or extended family member, one of the key things which is happening is, of course, the problems they are facing in managing corona at home while home quarantining, especially when it comes to cleaning things, taking care of yourself, taking medications on time, and food. Food is becoming one of the biggest challenges for people. It may sound like a small thing because it's just, some people may say that's just food, but as you said in the beginning, Vaishnav, it's also have been proven that nutrition is playing a very, very huge role, key role in recovery, as well as key role in how people recover, how fast or how slow people recover. Also, the history of nutrition is also playing that kind of role. So how did you guys manage when you came back to home? What was the schedule like?
As soon as we got home, we just decided that we're going to drop the whole cleaning act, like forget it. Like for 10 days, like the house turned into a desert, it doesn't matter. We only focused on resting. So that's something we ended up doing a lot. We were constantly taking a lot of naps, right? Your body is genuinely very tired from the whole experience. You have antivirals going in, and God knows what's going inside your whole system, right? Because your body is at war and you have no idea what's going on, right? So we were advised to take rest, like do not cook, do not do anything, just no heavy loads, no moving around, no exercise. You don't want to strain anything, just take rest, naps, whatever. Sleep is the best recovery after all. That's the best tool for recovery. As far as food is concerned, we did end up, since we already are sort of a family who doesn't eat too much, or like we don't indulge ourselves in a lot of food, we sort of, because of that luxury, we ended up like making the bare minimum but healthy food, like nutritious stuff, vegetables, eggs, we're non-vegetarian, so like some form of meat once in a while, all that stuff, and a decently good amount of carbs, because you need that energy, right? This is not the time where we say like less carbs is the best policy, because you can't burn it off and all that, but out of experience, I have eaten like a crazy human being, and it doesn't show too much in my body, so I'm like super happy about that. But so it just goes to show on how much your body actually consumes what you put into your system, right? Like, yeah. So yeah, it's crazy, like how much your body really needs that amount of food. Yeah, then just taking care of yourself, man. Like keeping yourself and your family members a priority, and constantly just resting. I think that's the most important thing.
And but you said you guys were cooking, so you never like got any deliveries or outside food or any help from somewhere in terms of getting food for yourself and your family members.
Yeah, it was only a once in a while kind of thing where we did order food, and that only happened when we were like really not in that position to cook, or like it would be just for one meal, not all 3 meals or something like that. And also, sort of the difficult part of eating during this time is you have no sense of taste and smell. So basically, whatever you put in your mouth is sort of sour and tasteless and weird. So anything you enjoyed before like tastes like complete and utter rubbish this time. So it's not like you sit here and you enjoy food. So it's not. Or even when we did get some food delivered, it was just like put something into our bodies and keep it full so that it has some fuel. That's something you shouldn't take lightly, because if you don't feel like the food is tasty and you lose your appetite, you still gotta eat. Because if you don't, it's really doing a lot of damage to your own body, because it doesn't have anything to pull from. It was only a once in a while kind of deal to get some food from outside. We did try and cook everything at home,
Right.
and yeah, with less strain.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that of course makes sense because it's not a time to like focus on the variety of the menu, but rather how much it can fill you up or how much nutrition it can provide you. That actually reminds me of something really interesting, and it was kind of popping up in one of the feeds, either on social media or some of the forums, that protein has actually proven to be one of the key elements in helping people recover from this. Or people who have had a protein-rich diet have actually probably found it easier to recover from coronavirus. And I'm not sure, but again, how scientifically backed that is, we all need to research further. But this is something which is popping up at a couple of places in my feed. It struck me because you mentioned that you guys were eating eggs and meat once in a while, because foods like these, whole foods, all the grains and all the carbohydrates, whole carbohydrates, of course, I'm sure that would be better off in terms of giving your body a better nutrition compared to, let's say, just a packet of chips or something. Because when you're weak and when you're not in a position to kind of stand and cook and all that, the packet of chips will look probably a very appetizing option. But I think whole foods will be much better. And it is so, I mean, of course, we as a country are going through a very tough time, but it is so amazing to see people coming together and doing this. I think I have read, there on all the communities on Twitter, Reddit, everywhere, there are literally links of 10-20 communities, people who are either giving out food for free or giving out food at a very, very nominal home cooked meal rate. And that is actually helping out a lot of families, because as I mentioned, it becomes super difficult to cook during these periods, especially when you're weak and you still have to eat because you have to recover. So how has the journey been from there, Vyshnav? Once you guys got back from hospital, was everything fine? Did you have any kind of relapse, any kind of weakness, any kind of problem in any other area in terms of breathing or anything of that sort, or was everything a smooth ride over from then on?
So that's when the whole drama actually started to happen, right? We got home, everything was fine. When I say everything was fine, we were fine in terms of like, hey, like the virus is sort of okay, it's gone, whatever. But like we were all weak, we were all tired, bodies constantly aching. Especially one thing I've noticed is muscles were hurt, muscles were cramping randomly. It's constant like muscle pains and everything. But other than that, it was fun. It was smooth sailing for like 2-3 days. And then for me personally, sort of like a brain fog kind of situation started setting. And that started making me panic. So it was something I've never experienced before. Again, like just like the body aches, but this thing was pretty crazy because it makes you feel very floaty, very vague. You have no idea what's going on. It is difficult to understand certain stuff. And weird thing was my family wasn't feeling that way. They were feeling a slight vagueness, but it wasn't as bad as I was feeling it. So that got me a little concerned. So I did end up like talking to my doctor, my dad's cousin, and he said it was completely fine. It's very normal, and it's pretty much documented within young people that they do end up getting this COVID fog, as they call it, and it's just something that the virus. I mean, we don't take this virus that seriously, but like it's gone to a point where it starts to affect your brain. It's no laughing matter, right? Like you don't know where it's going and what damage it's doing. But yeah, so this whole fog period lasted around a week and a half, which was like pure torture for me because every time I wake up, I think, hey, I'm back to normal, and in like half an hour, I'm back to feeling completely vague and out of it, and couldn't concentrate on anything, couldn't watch television, couldn't read anything. Couldn't get back to work, which, if you're sitting at home for like 10 days doing absolutely nothing, you would want to kind of indulge yourself in some activity to keep yourself busy, right? But for me, surprisingly, I couldn't do any of those things. And thankfully, like from last week onwards, I've been feeling much better. Like the whole vagueness and everything started to like slowly dissipate. And I've gotten back to my previous mental state. So it was definitely a big period of sort of anxiety because you feel completely vulnerable in terms of you have no mental guards up, you have no idea what's going on around you. You're completely like vulnerable in that state, and it's quite an experience. Yeah.
What is? I mean, I think of course, and that brain fog is a very, very. I think it's something which a lot of people experience across diseases, and I think COVID has, as you mentioned, it has proven to be one of the causes for brain fog, especially in young folks, as you mentioned. But probably, I think some of the listeners or some of these readers of our blog may not know, Vaishnav, what exactly that feeling is. So, could you tell, or maybe paint a more vivid picture of what it felt like when you mentioned it's a brain fog?
So it was pretty much a point where you feel you're completely sort of lost in terms of where you are emotionally, what you're feeling. You try and follow conversations, but you keep dropping out. And this happens all of a sudden. It doesn't gradually build up to that point and then gradually go off. It just started all of a sudden one day. I couldn't just understand anything. It's hard to keep up with conversation. It's hard to understand the second person, what they're saying. Even simple instructions feel like a little bit like, whoa, okay, this is way too much. So I'm guessing it's something on the lines of if you're like very, very high, you're completely out of it. And for some time, actually, before I had my conversation with my doctor, I did assume that this is the job of medication. Because, your body has gone through so much and you're putting so much heavy sort of medication into your system that it has sort of manifested into you feeling high, because medication does have that bad rep of having that kind of mouth to it. But yeah, it's only after the conversation that I understood that it was indeed the virus which is doing this. It's quite a weird period, like. So basically the symptoms of this whole fog thing was you feel completely you're completely vague. You have no idea what's going on. Like I said, conversations are difficult. Focusing on things are very difficult. You can't follow, let's say, a simple YouTube video. It gets to that point. To get a movie, like a 10-minute video becomes intense to follow. And yeah, so, and emotionally as well, you're just in a place of like sort of self-doubt, and like I was personally in a space of like, will I recover from this? Because I've never been through that before. So I was in that space. So yeah, that's what you go through. But I'm lucky to report in a sense that it does go away, because that was my whole like space. My mind space was that, will I stay in this kind of element forever? But it does go away. So that's a good news. And one thing my doctor did tell me, and this is for anybody who is suffering through this, listening to this podcast, is do not try and force yourself to concentrate. That's the advice he gave. Do not put more stress on your brain. If you can't focus, just let it. Do not attempt working. Do not attempt reading a book. Do not attempt watching television. Just let yourself be. Take ample of rest. Be in that position. Right? Do not force yourself to understand something, because you're putting extra pressure on your mind and your brain to go through the thing, and it just makes the process of healing much more difficult. So that's something I was advised.
That's actually very interesting to hear, man, because I think most of the time when somebody's going through these kind of situations, and going through COVID as a family is as tough as it could be, right? It's a fatal disease. It's causing so many fatalities. So I'm sure it would have been a very, very difficult time for you and the family, like your family members as well. Now, in all these situations, the typical advice which comes from, let's say, people is, to meditate and to focus and all that. But I guess in this situation, it's totally opposite, right? You just have to be. Nothing else, right? Just have to be. And so, is that something, is that something that you followed, Vaishnav?
Yeah, it was quite difficult, because I am slightly a creative person. I like doing my things, and I like being creative. I hate sitting idle. This was sort of torture for me as well, because you just had to sit and absolutely not concentrate on anything. And it was, especially when it was one of those really bad days. Some days were pretty fine. Some days were like really, really bad. So, especially on those bad days, to completely sit and not do much, and just, and you can't even keep thinking about it. You can't put mental stress on yourself, right? You can't think about oh no, what's going to happen, because you don't want to indulge in that anxiety of whatever it is. So yeah, man, it was quite difficult, and I'm sure whoever goes through this stuff, and that's another interesting part I've heard about, is that these brain fogs do end up affecting people who are more on the creative side. So I'm guessing it has to deal with your right and left brain hemispheres or whatever, it has to deal with that as well. So people who are more logical end up not going through this whole experience. And this is a very specific thing. So I'm sure there are people going through it, but yeah.
It could be, man. It could be our body, our brain, and the whole biology is as complicated as it gets, right? I mean, still the most complicated machine that anybody has ever made. The interesting part here is the one interesting part here is that, instead of just trying to be, or let's say, trying to force ourselves into, being positive or being thinking at all, instead of doing that, we just have to be chill, basically. As if I were to say it more laid back and casual term, it's more just be there and chill and try to rest as much as possible. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
And how about Vaishnav? So how long was the medication? Are you still on medication, or was it there for 2 weeks or 10 days or something?
Yeah, so I'm out of medication right now. The medication lasted for around 15 days. So yeah, about 2 weeks. And again, in that, there were a couple of things which finished off in 5 days, and some stuff which ended up for the entire 2 weeks and all that. The only thing is, those medications end up being heavy. So if you are prescribed those medications, all you got to make sure is you eat well. That's, I think, coming back to that point is the most important thing, because these medications, even if you're out of the hospital, these medications do end up being really heavy on your system. Mm-hmm. So you've got to nourish your body really well. Mm-hmm. So other than that, it's fine. And I'm out of medication now, and it's been a good week since I've stopped having anything put in my body in that sense.
And both your dad and mom are also out of medication, no?
Yeah, we were all in the same boat, so everything finished together. So we all went through the same sort of side effects and feelings and whatever was going on. It was just me that went through this additional step of this whole brain fog system.
And dude, was there any side effects whatsoever? Did you experience anything, or your mom or dad, in terms of weakness, or how long did it take to kind of get back the same energy levels that you had before you got this virus?
So I'd say we're still not back to like where we were like 100%, right? Because we still do suffer occasionally from body aches and all these things, and that can also be from the fact that we were just like in bed all the time, right? You're in bed all the time. You're definitely going to get sore muscles and all these things. But we're still not back to like proper strength levels. At least I'm not. Like I used to. So back when I used to work out, I could do a set of couple of exercises pretty well, and right now even if I just like mildly attempt it, I cannot, like I cannot do the same reps as I could. So I have no idea what it's done to, like, you know, in terms of what it attacks, you know, the virus, what it attacks. Is it your muscles, is what cells it goes for, and all these things. So yeah, strength wise, we're still not back there yet, but mentally everyone's fine. Physically, we're definitely much better. Like, you know, you don't feel anything in the lungs, the throat's back to normal. Breathing is pretty fine. The oxygen levels are perfect. All of that is great. Yeah.
Right.
Also, another interesting thing I found is that your heart rate does tend to stay higher for like that 1.5 weeks out of the hospital, which is also kind of weird because you could like literally feel your like pulse, you know, tapping away. That was a little bit like, whoa, what's happening? But yeah, it took a while. So it was like quite a process. It wasn't like, hey, like you got something, you go to hospital, it's cured, you're back home and it's over. It did have its like flow to the whole thing.
I'm sure, like otherwise it would have been like, it's not like a flu which you catch seasonally, like where you just go through a temperature for like 5 days and 3 days or 5 days depending on the individuals, and then you on the 6th day you're pretty much back to the normal as you were just 5 days before. But I think in the case of COVID-19, the effects are lasting for longer, and people are feeling winded out for much longer. They cannot, of course, you cannot just go start sprinting probably right after you have recovered. That cannot happen. And as you mentioned, you are taking time to gain the strength back. But what I'm looking for here is, Vyshnav, is there a positive sign in the strength recovery, and is energy levels and feeling all right all the time? I mean, is there a positive trend that you're observing?
Oh yes, of course. Like if you say in that way, like we're completely back to normal. It's just like if you really like deep dive into it, we're just not back to like where we were like a month ago. But where we were compared to us in the hospital, 100%, we're like so much more better, right? So it's definitely positive. It's just that, compared to like if somebody is gonna say, hey, like, before this whole surge in cases happened, like people weren't taking this as serious as they should have. So it's for those people who I'm saying that, like if you think this is somewhat like a hoax or a joke or whatever, it's just not, because it does take a toll on your body, and it doesn't matter what age or what fitness level you're at, because it affects everyone differently, and if it does affect you, you go through this whole process. So it's quite an experience.
Dude, I mean, there's a guy on Instagram. So I was checking, and he was COVID positive, I guess, like a few weeks ago. And so he had a post where he was like squatting 116, 118, 200 kilos. And then he has written that, he's not back to normal completely, but he is slowly getting his training back. So, I mean, I was like, yeah, dude, that is a champion right there.
Yeah.
So that definitely is a very, very, I would say, encouraging. It was quite encouraging to see that, even after like going through this entire process, as I mentioned, it's a longer process. People are getting back to completely where they were before. It's not that you are like weakened by 20% for your entire lifetime or something like that. So before we wrap up this discussion, a couple of more things. Number one is I just want to quickly cover a little more on the food, because that is probably the biggest key for people in recovery. So what are the kind of food you were given in hospitals? Like, was there any specific items or things like that which you were given during your stay in the hospital?
Nothing specific, but it was more like you did get your servings of eggs and chicken and all that, if you did sign up for that. If you were a vegetarian, a lot of vegetables, And you definitely need the carbs to survive. So roti, some rice, stuff like that. Always having some soup, vegetable soup, chicken broth, any of those things. All of these things, it really helps you stay up and stay active. you know and another thing I've noticed is that they were constantly getting milk.
Right.
So I'm guessing, yeah, I mean, as long as you're not lactose intolerant, I think it's to get more nutrients out of anything that is possible. I mean, even if you're home, I guess like the best thing is to indulge in a lot of vegetables, some meats if you're into it, some eggs, um, good supplements if you have access to that, good quality supplements, good quality fats like avocados, fish oil, all that stuff, or butter, even butter is great. So all of these things really help, and if you could indulge yourselves in soups, broths, anything like that. Yeah, anything that basically anything the healthy side, like which really puts your body in good form. And I think that's sort of the same trend I noticed in the hospital as well. They were trying to just again, larger scale, but they were trying to like provide good sort of home cooked food, for nourishment.
No, that makes sense. And as you said, supplements also, because I have, at least in my extended family members who have kind of been through the journey or who are still going through the journey. One common thing which we have noticed across all these diagnoses is that everybody has been prescribed a good amount of multivitamins and things like that, as a supplement, because like zincs and all that stuff, depending on the individuals probably. So because I guess that's something which is helping people recover. Okay, so quickly, one more thing, Vaishnav, is like, because you as an individual, since you mentioned so much about the whole brain fog experience and all that, did you think this is also like a mentally straining experience, irrespective of age, for people? Maybe for our parents and your dads and moms, maybe because they have lived so much life, so probably it's they're more wiser to handle things. But more for younger folks, did you feel that it was a mentally straining experience, or like was it causing any challenges to you in terms of mental health or being anxious and all that stuff?
Yeah, of course. So psychological aspects were pretty interesting for me to like experience, because I'm generally pretty mentally strong guy in terms of like I know what I want, I go get it. But this was, so first of all, before the whole brain fog thing, you're kind of, even when you go to the hospital, you're kind of helpless because you've got to stay in bed all day. And if you're like a sort of active, hyperactive person, that's like the worst thing you can be put in, right? Like you don't want to stay in a hospital bed all day and not be able to do anything, not be able to move. So that definitely was something else. And also the home quarantining, where you sit at home for 14-15 days. That was no fun because, again, like human beings, we're social animals. We do want to, it doesn't matter what kind of pandemic that's going around, you want to see other faces, you want to step out and get some fresh air and like see what's happening around in your city and all that. But yeah, that was another restriction. But then the whole fog and the anxiety that, at least for me, that came with the fog, and it was quite challenging, I guess, a lot of people have the psychological this thing coming from like quarantining, especially in isolation. Like if you're completely alone in your house and you have nobody else with you. I was fortunate enough to have my family with me, so at least I didn't like feel alienated, right? Like a lot of people, I'm sure, will feel alienated if they isolate them. So that's one thing. But yeah, definitely, there's always those elements of anxiety which kicks in, and if you're sort of prone to depression, if you're prone to like feeling a little low once in a while, I'm sure this whole thing can eat into it more than like this thing. It might actually trigger stuff. You might end up in panics and all of these things. So yeah, and you're constantly in effect. Like I said, right, your heart rate doesn't like get back to normal for like 1.5 weeks. So you're constantly thinking about that, which side to sleep on, because you don't want to strain your heart, and all of these things. You might have some digestive issues. You might have some, sort of slight sharp pains when you take deeper breaths. So if you're in sort of like a mental space in general, where you take these things a little too seriously, a little too like, if you focus on like, oh my God, what is that pain in my chest when I inhale a little too hard, and all of these things, of course, those will definitely induce anxiety. There's definitely that trigger mechanism which works. If you're prone to it, there are chances for you to like, probably indulge in. So I guess the best thing is if you to keep yourself sort of distracted, sort of in the moment, keep yourself resting. I mean, when you're napping, there's no chance of you getting an anxiety attack. So like, hey, naps are the saviors, I guess. But yeah.
Dude, so you mentioned this pain thing that, when you're breathing deep. So are there symptoms which are not very obvious for people to take note of when they're going through this? Like,
so I think it's kind of on and off. The pains. It only happened to me once in a week. Not even once in a while. It's like randomly you just get like a pull like in your chest, or like you have like a very dry throat, very rough throat, or once you start coughing you cannot stop until like 3-4 coughs or something like that. So it's all like sort of triggered by something. The virus leaves whatever it leaves in your body, and these things get triggered if you do an activity in a certain way. So if I do take a really deep breath, back last week, you get like a slight sharp pain in your chest, in your lungs, whatever. And I did suffer from a very dry throat. So if I started coughing, it wasn't until the 5th or 6th cough that I could like control the thing. So all of those things really, it's kind of mind-boggling, because I didn't expect it to leave such a long residue of things that was still happening in my body. I was expecting it to be done in like a week, 10 days max. Kind of deal. So even I didn't take it as seriously as I should have in that sense. But yeah, I'm happy to be a survivor in that sense. Like, I'm happy to like go through the experience, and I'm happy to have a mild case, because I can't imagine what people are going through right now. So.
Yeah, it's just an overall very bad situation, of course. And of course, like, people are bound to be anxious, man, because with everything that is going around, of course, there's one school of thought where people constantly ask people to be positive and look at the silver lining. But if you really look at it, that the truth of the matter is that with everything that is going around in our country right now, it's just okay to be not, I would say, not it's okay to kind of grieve if you have to, it's okay to feel the pain and be sad, because literally people are dying all across. What matters is kind of be disciplined about things, taking care of all the steps and guidelines which have been set. There are doctors and the frontline workers, like masking and sanitizing and not going out without the need and all that. And I'm referring to all the positivity shills who have been posting their Goa vacation pictures even today, because that just does not sit well with people who are fighting on the front line, right? Yeah. And the best part is that even with all the sadness and the grief, what people can look into is the fact and the numbers, and the numbers clearly say that most of the people who go through this the disease, more than 95, 96, 97%, they are recovering well and leading their life back to normal. And we have one great example in form of you, Vaishnav, and your family. You all went through this, fought this through, and then you're back to normal, and kind of getting back to your lives in normal as well. Just before we wrap up this conversation, Vaishnav, last question is, where are you guys right now in terms of quarantining, and has there been any specific guidelines, special guidelines set for you by the doctors, or have you been asked to? Of course, right now everything is in lockdown, but for you specifically, for your family, has there been special pointers or guidelines given to stay away from few things or people or things like that?
So once you do discharge, they do ask you to take care of infections, because you don't want another complication that comes out because your body is already weak. And if the virus still exists in your body, And I'm speaking about like 5 days after, a stay in a hospital. So you still have the virus in you, right? So you don't want to risk infections. That's definitely one thing. Another thing is in terms of course, see, once you go through this whole experience, you do become extra careful in terms of everything you do because you don't want to go through the experience again. Double masking, hand sanitizing, not stepping out unless you really, really have to. Because we luckily live in an age where we get everything delivered at home, and we have multiple platforms that we can rely on for those kind of things. So unless you really have to leave home, honestly, that all of us should practice not leaving home, right? We should stay indoors. But as far as everything else is concerned, one of the main things was infections. Like, stay away from infections and keep yourself like clean and healthy, hygienic, and not traveling too much, not meeting people, keeping social distancing like a real thing, keeping 6 feet apart. Those things, which are basic, WHO guidelines, but they still hold true. Yeah, that's what was advised.
Yeah, of course, that makes a lot of sense because, that is in general a guideline for everyone, but especially for people who have gone through this, I guess, taking care of the infection must be one of the highest priorities. And are you guys going to be eligible for vaccination anytime soon?
I don't think so because we have antibodies in our system. So the doctor said it's not a good idea to get vaccination because you might lead to complications. So the idea right now is to stay without a vaccination for like 1 month and then get tested. And they will reveal what kind of antibody count you have in your body. And accordingly, if you have a lower antibody count, then you can go and get a vaccination because that's what it does, right? It increases your antibody count to fight off the virus. But if you do have a higher amount still, you're better off waiting 2 months again to like get another test before you move forward. So anybody who does get corona, it is advised to like check your antibody amount before you get a vaccination done.
Okay, that's something which I had not realized, but that's a good pointer for everyone who is listening as well. So before we jump into getting vaccination, because it could have also happened that somebody may have got the virus without symptoms and recovered from it as well. So now they have the antibodies, but they do not know, and they go ahead and take the vaccination. That will be a whole different scenario altogether. So that was quite a good point, and that's why it's always helpful to talk to people who have been through this, right? So that's about it from my side, Vyshnav. It's like absolutely thrilling, amazing to be speaking to you. Of course, we speak on a daily basis, but for this special occasion, to bring this conversation in front of people who listen to this series or to go through our blogs or YouTube channel or Instagram, I think it's going to be one hell of a valuable session for everyone right now out there who is going through the pandemic together. So that was quite insightful, man. Do you have any advice for people before we part ways?
First of all, don't take this lightly. Do everything in your power to help. If you have connections, make sure, even if the simplest things of like, if you can deliver things to other people's houses, if you can help your neighbors, there's nothing like it, right? Because I think this is a period where we really have to show how humane we are, because we are human beings, right? We're not machines. So we have to show how humane we are. And other than that, follow everything that's in the guidelines, and just take extra care. Like, we can feel maybe we're completely like immune to the virus, maybe we're not, right? But why take the chances? Why take the chances for somebody else? Why spread the stuff? Even if you're fine, why spread it? So always keep distance, always sanitize, always keep yourself clean, and always double mask. Like, keep yourself healthy, and also like take this time to keep yourself fit, because I think the fitter you are, the better chances your body has to like recover from this faster, right? So that's always a good thing to do.
That was quite insightful, Vyshnav. And as Vyshnav said, guys, always double mask, always sanitize, keep the distance. And he's very right about the fact that it's a good time to be fit and probably be fitter than ever before. Eat good food, because as he said, the fitter you are, you have the better chances of recovery, and you are giving your body a much, much bigger shot at coming back from this stronger, even if COVID comes and gets you, because the rate at which it is spreading right now, of course, there's a bigger chance that pretty much every human on this earth may end up contracting this at some point in their life. So always better to be strong and ready for it when it comes to it. And also, as he mentioned very rightly, that it's the time when we all must represent the human side of our nature and try to give. And this is a time when you try to give out without thinking twice, without actually thinking about the results and thinking about opportunities, because it's just sad to see the kind of situation we as a country are going through. And this has also given us as a brand an opportunity to kind of contribute in whatever manner we can. It's not about the size of the donation or size of the effort that you put forward, but it's actually the gesture and the act of kindness that you do. And of course, we as a Zymrat team, Vyshnav, me, and everybody else, we have decided to kind of contribute 2% of the entire sales for the month of April and May towards COVID relief funds, and we'll be distributing it across NGOs. Whether it's going to be a small or big amount, that only time will tell, because as a lot of small business like us are also suffering. But here we are not talking about the size of the donation or act of kindness, it's about the gesture, and we do whatever we can in terms of putting our foot forward to fight this disease off from the face of the earth. So that is about it from this series, guys. It was really nice, talking to Vyshnav and learning from his experience as well. And we'll get back to you again with another episode, and we'll talk to somebody else who's really interesting and doing good things in their life. Till then, all the best. Bye, and see you again soon.